Richard Cornock, aka the Funky Farmer, is a dairy farmer turned YouTube star based in Titherington in South Gloucestershire. Now, Richard has been farming for 40 years, and to celebrate, he has given away 40 trees to some of his followers. But how did he choose where they went, and what sort of trees are they? Let's go and have a chat to the man himself. Good morning, Richard.
Morning, Caroline.
So 40 years in farming then. How has it changed, Richard?
Blimey. Well, when I started, there was still what we call vintage. The sort of vintage tractors you see at classic shows where you see like a Massey 35 or something like a T20, a Grey Fergie. They were the tractors still being used quite regularly on a lot of farms. And now, I have to laugh now they're classed as vintage or classic tractors. Well, in my day, when I first started in 1984, they weren't vintage. They were just sort of old.
Do you know what, though? I've got such lovely memories of those tractors, because my next door neighbour, as I was growing up, he used to work on the land, but he'd come home at lunchtime for his dinner. He'd have his hour's break, and he'd come up on a tractor exactly like you described, and it would be parked outside. He'd nip in and then go back to work on his tractor again. There was something just so wonderful about those, wasn't there?
Oh, they're lovely. I mean, they are lovely little tractors. This is why they're still cherished today on these tractor runs and things. They're lovely little tractors. You can work on them with a spanner. They're not too complicated, but they've got something about them, haven't they? They're just cute, if you like, I suppose.
Yeah, and my dad also grew up on a farm, and he used to drive this tractor around. It was a red Massey Ferguson. Do you know, I can even remember its registration. It was OVE 776R, and it's wherever I go, I'll always remember the registration of that tractor and the fun we had perched in there in it. I mean, no mod cons, no aircon, no radio or anything. But what do you need that for? You're out there on the land having the best time.
Well, there was nothing to go wrong either, was there? All those gadgets you have on a tractor now, all electronic, and they are fantastic, GPS and everything like that. But I look at them and think, will this tractor be around in 40 or 50 years' time? Because it's all electronics, and a farmer can't really fix those, but on those old traditional tractors from 40 or 50 years ago, it was very much hands-on. You could repair anything on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only will they still be around, will people want them as collector's items? Will they have that same kind of like, oh, look at that tractor when they look at these new modern ones? But so things have changed in regard of, tractors and so on and so forth. What about the way farms are run and farmed? Has that changed?
Oh, massively, really. I mean, I can look around here and think of the loss of the dairy farm is a good example. When I first started, sort of early 80s, there was probably, I can't remember the exact figure, say there was 35,000 dairy farmers. I think we're down to about 7,500 now. But we're still producing the same amount of milk. And that's because the efficiency has gone up. And because of the cost, but the returns haven't really gone up in the same way. So a lot of farms have either expanded or they've just packed in, and it's interesting. It's the same story with arable and beef and stuff. That everything's got bigger. I mean, the farms have got bigger, but the machinery has got bigger that goes with it. And I'm sure some of your listeners will have noticed the size when you see farmers moving implements from the field, which will probably be starting about this time of year. You'll notice the size of them, especially if you've had to reverse down a little country lane because someone's coming the other way with a tractor with a huge plough on the back or something.
Yeah, that's my worst fear, of being stuck down those country lanes in that scenario, because I'm not going to lie, reversing is not my strong point, to be fair. So I approach those country lanes with my heart in my mouth thinking, please don't let there be a tractor, please don't let there be a tractor. And that's basically my journey. But what about the way that things are farmed, in as much as, because when I was a really small girl, it was tiny fields that as I've grown up, they were kind of ripped out, the hedgerows were ripped apart, and then you've got your big fields, so obviously the machinery can get in, you can grow more, but not so good for the environment. Are we seeing a change in that?
Yeah, this is really interesting, actually, because conservation work and stuff is quite a passion of mine, really, and I try and manage the farm in a way that we work with wildlife, and this is really funny. Okay, so you've got to look back historically, I think, really. So if you think during the war, there was a massive shortage of food in this country. and then rationing was around, and that carried on into the late 1950s, I think, the end of rationing. And there was a real, you remember the expression dig for victory? There was a real push for farming to become more productive, to produce more food for the home market and everything. So the government were really backing farmers to mechanise, to improve yields by using a lot of sprays, but also to, as you quite rightly said, take out a lot of hedgerows. And believe it or not, and my dad told me this, in his day, he could get grant funding to fill in ponds and to take out hedgerows. Believe it or not, he got grant funding to remove hedgerows. Now, you wouldn't believe that now because it's complete reverse. It's a no-no now. We realise, I think, the value of this ecology on the farm. And I can now get grant funding to dig out ponds and to plant hedges. So how about that? How about that? It's gone completely full circle and back to... they want farmers to work with the environment, which I really believe is the right way to go. I think I've just done a video on YouTube that went out today, actually, and I just mentioned at the end about a little coppice I planted on the corner of a field probably 15, 20 years ago, which is just starting to establish, really. And I always say, I feel like you should give a bit back to nature on your farm, because for me personally, this is how I look at it anyway. I've taken my living off this farm, so I feel like I should give something back. And I think a lot of farmers kind of work with it. The older generation, perhaps my dad's era, are very much like, well, we'll take those hedges out, because that was what they were kind of taught, almost by the government, by offering these grants and things, productivity all the way. And I think there is a kind of new wave of people coming through who think, let's do something with that, with wildlife. But also the way, any of your listeners are aware, or some of your listeners might be aware, that there is a thing called the single farm payment, which farmers got a payment for just basically running a farm, to put it in simple terms. That comes to an end completely in 2028. And the new initiative now is called SFI, which basically is a sort of grant-based system which encourages you to manage your farm with wildlife, and in return you will receive some funding for that. So like a good example would be looking after your hedgerows. You can get some funding providing you do a 2-year trimming or 2 or 3 year trimming regime, which means that you don't trim them every year, which gives more cover for birds and food sources like berries, and also you get another further grant funding if there's trees in that hedgerow. So encouraging you, if you like, to either leave trees or to plant some trees in that hedgerow, which I kind of think, this is the way we should go with farming. We should be encouraged to look after this wildlife, because it does come at a cost.
Yeah.
But also, we need to get some money back onto farm somehow, because this loss of this single farm payment is a bit of a nightmare, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could talk about that forever, but that was just something.
Well, do you know what? And it's all fascinating. I could talk to you about farming all day, but like you say, this is Farming Diary, sadly. I'd love to host a show like that. But, talking of giving something back, you are doing this with these 40 trees. So right, okay, you're giving away 40 trees. So who to? Do people just say, can I have a tree, Richard? How does it work?
I've done it now. They've just gone out, actually. So this is really interesting, right? So let's go back to my 40 years, okay? So I left school in 1984, and I did a government scheme called YTS, Youth Training Scheme, actually on my dad's farm. So that was my 40 years start point, okay? And it was linked with Hartbury College, blah, blah, blah. So I woke up one day and I realised, hang on a minute, I've actually done 40 years. This is a bit weird. I ought to do something about that, because, there's a couple of other landmarks on this farm. So in 2022, we actually did this 200 years of the Cornott family on this farm. And I didn't do anything to celebrate that. And also, I've done 10 years of YouTubing about 2 years ago, and I didn't celebrate that. So I thought, right, I'll do something for 40 years of farming. So my original thought was to plonk a tree on the farm somewhere. And I thought, well, actually, that's a bit dull, really, one tree. And 40 is quite a lot for me to put on this farm, because I haven't got a lot of space where I can put them. And then I thought, why don't I try something a bit different? I've got this kind of following, worldwide following, if you like, through YouTube. Why don't I try and do something positive there? So what I did, first of all, I actually contacted some well-known farming YouTubers, so around England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland. So the likes of, some of your listeners might know them if they're into farming, people like Tom Pemberton, and then I Farm, We Farm in Ireland, and then there's Sheep Game in Scotland, and then there's also Gareth Wyn-Jones in Wales. These are all well-known YouTubers. So I got in touch with them and said, would you be part of this project? So I sent them trees, and then I threw it out there on my YouTube channel that if anyone wanted to apply for a tree, please do. But at the same time, please, if you want a tree, tell me why you want it, and give me a good reason. So and I didn't push it very hard actually. I literally put one video out, and straight away I got over 100 people reply. So I thought,
right, and then you thought, right, now what am I going to do? I can't split it in half. How are we going to divvy this up?
This is a dilemma. And to be honest, what I did, I didn't actually push it anymore because I thought I don't really want 500 people to choose from. So and there were so many people that had good reasons. Some people were planting in memory of people that had passed away. Some of them were doing it for children and things like that. I was like, oh my goodness. So actually what I did, I had to put them in a hat. I didn't want to pick people and upset someone. So very diplomatically, if you like, I put it in a hat and I drew them out. And so that was done at the end of January. And I then arranged for them to be sent out by courier from a couple of nurseries. One in Somerset, a nursery in Somerset did all the postal ones. South Gloucestershire nursery did local ones around Gloucestershire. And then also, because of customs, like the Somerset one wouldn't send to Ireland, so I had to find a nursery in Ireland which did that.
And everyone's pulled together. And what sort of trees did you send out, Richard? We've only got another 30 seconds, so all oak trees. All
oak trees. And if you're really interested, you can go on my YouTube channel. There's a video I made which shows every single person with their tree or their trees. Brilliant. And it's a lovely thing. Fantastic. I'm really chuffed how it's worked, We should all give something back,
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I watched that video yesterday of the cow licking your backside or something like that it was doing.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, bless. Listen, we will catch up more soon, but brilliant that you're putting something back, and well done you. But go find him. They're great videos. Just look up The Funky Farmer and you will find him, and you can delight in seeing all that he's done. And he's a very comedic person as well, so go and have a look.